The late afternoon sun dipped lower, painting the horizon in hues of bruised purple and angry orange. A worried watch had begun. Axel, perched on the highest stool inside the clubhouse garage, was meticulously oiling the chain of his '79 shovelhead. The rhythmic scrape and click of the links was the only sound for a long time, the usual raucous banter, replaced by a strange, almost reverent quiet. Every man in the room, ostensibly engaged in their own tasks, polishing chrome, sorting tools, nursing lukewarm coffee, was actually listening, waiting. Finally, Hammer dropped his wrench onto a workbench with a clang that made several men jump. "All right, this is stupid," he grumbled, rubbing a hand across his bald head. "We're grown men. We don't need to stand guard like concerned nannies." Knuckles, seated at a grimy table, meticulously cleaning the grips of his custom. 45, didn't look up. "He's a kid, Hammer, and he's scared." "Scared of what, exactly?" Hammer challenged, though his voice lacked its usual bite. "The guy's a politician, right? Probably just a bit of a windbag. Kid probably just doesn't like him." Axel straightened, wiping his greasy hands on a rag. "You saw his face, Hammer. He wasn't talking about not liking him. He was talking about what happens when the doors close." The memory of the boy's wide, earnest eyes, the slight tremble in his lower lip as he'd spoken of his mother's soon-to-be husband, was still vivid. It wasn't just fear. It was a deep, unsettling certainty that had resonated with every man in the room. "So, what's the plan, then?" asked Bones, a wiry man who rarely spoke. He'd been unusually quiet since the boy's visit, his gaze often drifting to the empty space where the child had stood. Axel pushed off his stool, the heavy chain draped over his shoulder. "The plan is exactly what we promised. We show up. We stand there. We don't make a scene unless he makes one." He looked around at the faces, some still skeptical, others grimly determined. "And if he does make one, well, then we remind him what happens when you mess with people, especially kids." A low murmur of agreement rippled through the room. The unspoken promise had been made. There was a shift in the air, a collective tightening of resolve. They weren't just showing up for a wedding. They were showing up for a rescue, a silent intervention. As dusk deepened into night, the clubhouse took on a different character. The usual boisterous energy was subdued, replaced by a focused anticipation. The bikes, usually roaring freely through the night, were checked, polished, and lined up with unusual precision. There was a sense of purpose, a quiet hum of readiness. The next morning dawned crisp and clear, a bright blue sky mocking the tension that settled heavy in the pit of Axel's stomach. He pulled on his vest, the weight of the leather feeling different today, imbued with a new kind of responsibility. Each patch, each pin, felt like a silent vow. They rode out, a formidable procession of roaring engines and gleaming chrome. The usual joy of the open road was tempered by the gravity of their destination. The wedding was being held at a tastefully manicured event hall on the outskirts of town, a place of pristine lawns and elegant fountains. It was the antithesis of their usual haunts, and the contrast was stark. As they pulled into the parking lot, a few early guests, dressed in their finest, stared with a mixture of fear and fascination. Axel dismounted, his gaze sweeping over the scene. The boy hadn't given them many details beyond the address and the time, leaving them to improvise. "All right," Axel said, his voice low and steady, carrying over the idling engines. "Knuckles, Hammer, you two flank me. Bones, Tiny, you take the rear. Everyone else, spread out. We're not here to cause trouble, but we're here to be seen." They moved as a single, intimidating unit, their boots crunching on the gravel path leading to the entrance. The murmurs of the arriving guests grew louder, then faded into stunned silence. Faces blanched. Children clutched their parents' hands. It was exactly the effect Axel had hoped for. The air crackled with unease, a prelude to the storm they anticipated. Inside, the hall was decorated with an abundance of white flowers and delicate tulle. A string quartet played a soft, classical piece, the music suddenly sounding thin and reedy against the backdrop of their arrival. The boy, dressed in a tiny suit, stood near the front, his eyes wide and anxious. When he saw them, a flicker of relief, so profound it was almost painful, crossed his small face. The groom, a tall man with a slick smile and impeccably tailored suit, was shaking hands near the altar. He paused, his smile faltering, as he caught sight of the advancing group. His eyes, which had held a superficial warmth moments before, narrowed into cold slits. The transformation was subtle, barely perceptible to anyone not specifically looking for it. But to Axel, it was a glaring red flag. The Hells Angels fanned out, forming a semicircle at the back of the small chapel, their leather and denim a stark contrast to the pastel finery of the other guests. Their presence was a palpable force, a wall of quiet power. The groom, however, regained his composure quickly, forcing a tight smile back onto his face. He even managed a polite, if strained, nod in their direction, though the chill in his gaze was unmistakable. The boy's mother, a pretty woman in a white gown, walked down the aisle, her face radiant. She didn't see the silent drama unfolding at the back of the room, her eyes fixed on the man waiting for her at the altar. Axel watched the groom's face as she approached, looking for any tell, any sign. The man was a mask of practiced charm, but Axel saw the slight tightening around his jaw, the almost imperceptible clench of his fists. The ceremony began. The officiant's voice droned on, but no one was truly listening. All eyes, it seemed, were on the bikers, or on the groom, or on the subtle interplay between the two. The tension in the room grew, a living entity that pressed down on everyone. Just as the officiant reached the part about "speak now or forever hold your peace," the groom's eyes flicked to Axel. There was a spark of something dangerous there, a raw fury barely contained. He took a deep breath, his smile faltering, and then, under the guise of adjusting his tie, he sent a chilling, silent threat in their direction. It was a clear challenge, a warning shot. The boy, who had been watching the groom intently, flinched. He knew, and Axel knew. The boy's instincts were right. The demon was real, and he was here. The secret shiver, the reception hall, a cavernous space draped in silk and strung with fairy lights, hummed with a forced joviality that grated on Axel's nerves. He leaned against a stone pillar near the entrance, a silent sentinel, his black leather vest a stark contrast to the pastel finery swirling around him. The other members of the Serpents were similarly dispersed, a network of watchful eyes observing the unfolding charade. Little Finn, his face scrubbed clean but still etched with a faint anxiety, clung to his mother's hand as she circulated, a radiant bride oblivious to the undercurrent of unease. Axel watched Victor Thorn, the newly minted husband, work the room. Thorn was a master of disarming charm, his laugh booming, his handshakes firm. He moved with an effortless grace, a politician in his natural habitat. But Axel had seen the flicker in his eyes at the altar, the brief tightening of his jaw when Finn had almost stumbled on his way down the aisle. Small tells, imperceptible to most, but glaringly obvious to someone accustomed to reading the unspoken language of threat. A sudden, sharp cry cut through the din. Axel's head snapped up, Finn, who had been attempting to navigate a crowded table toward the dessert buffet, had bumped into a passing waiter, sending a tray of champagne flutes crashing to the polished floor. The immediate silence in the vast room was deafening, every eye turning to the small boy. Thorn was across the room, mid-conversation with a group of city council members. His smile, fixed only moments before, vanished, replaced by a mask of cold fury. Axel felt a prickle of alarm. Thorn's reaction was disproportionate, immediate, and utterly devoid of the public pleasantries he had maintained all day. "Finn!" Thorn's voice, though not overtly loud, carried a chilling edge. The boy froze, tears welling in his eyes. His mother, caught off guard, moved to comfort him. But Thorn was already striding across the room, his movements stiff and purposeful. As Thorn approached, Axel subtly shifted his weight, his hand instinctively resting on the hilt of the knife concealed beneath his vest. He wasn't the only one. From the corner of his eye, Axel saw Ghost and Reaper subtly adjusting their stances, their gazes locked on Thorn. Thorn reached Finn, not bending, but standing over him, a dark shadow engulfing the small boy. "Look what you've done, Finn," he said, his voice low, a venomous hiss that only those closest could hear. "Clumsy, as usual. Can't you do anything right?" Finn whimpered, shrinking further into himself. His mother, her face a mixture of shock and dawning horror, finally found her voice. "Victor, he's just a child. It was an accident." Thorn turned to her, his expression twisting into something ugly. An accident, or just another example of his ineptitude? He ruins everything, doesn't he, Amelia? His eyes, usually so warm and inviting, were now flat and devoid of warmth, like chips of obsidian. The transformation was chilling, a complete unveiling of the monster Finn had described. The charming politician was gone, replaced by a man radiating barely controlled rage. Amelia's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with a sudden, devastating understanding. The secret shiver that Finn had spoken of, the subtle tremor of fear, now coursed through her own veins. Axel decided then, this wasn't a warning shot. This was the full broadside. He pushed off the pillar, his boots making a soft scuff on the floor that, in the sudden tension, sounded like a thunderclap. The other serpents moved too, a slow, deliberate convergence that drew the attention of the entire room. Thorn's head snapped up, his furious gaze landing on Axel. He saw the black leather, the grim faces, the silent, unwavering presence of 20 men. For the first time all day, a genuine flicker of fear crossed Thorn's face, quickly masked by a defiant sneer. "What is the meaning of this?" Thorn demanded, his voice regaining some of its public bluster, though a tremor ran through it. "You men are ruining my wedding." Axel stopped a few feet from Thorn, his voice low and gravelly. "We're here, Mr. Thorn, because a little boy asked us to be. He had a feeling you weren't quite who you pretended to be." He nodded toward Finn, who was now clinging to his mother, his eyes fixed on Thorn with a terrified intensity. "Looks like he was right." Thorn's face purpled. "You dare accuse me? On my wedding day? Get out, all of you!" He gestured wildly, his composure finally shattering. The veneer of charming politician had completely disintegrated, revealing the true, dangerous man beneath. Amelia, her face pale, stepped between Thorn and Axel. "Victor, stop! Look at yourself! This isn't you!" But even as she spoke, the words sounded hollow, a desperate attempt to cling to a fantasy that had just shattered into 1,000 pieces. She looked at Finn, then at the menacing figure of Thorn, and the truth settled over her, heavy and cold. "He's right, Amelia," Axel said, his eyes never leaving Thorn's. The boy saw it, and now, so do you. The forbidden path. The opulent ballroom, moments ago a symphony of polite laughter and clinking crystal, now hummed with a different kind of energy. It was a low, dangerous thrum, a predator's growl beneath the veneer of civility. Thorn, his face a mask of barely contained fury, stood frozen. The shattered flutes at his feet a stark metaphor for his own unraveling composure. Amelia, her hand flying to her mouth, stared at her fiancé, a flicker of dawning horror in her eyes. The transformation was complete. The charming illusion had evaporated, leaving behind a chilling void. Axel stepped forward, his voice a low rumble that cut through the sudden silence. Funny how a little broken glass can reveal so much, isn't it, Thorn? The serpents fanned out subtly, their formidable presence now undeniable. A wall of leather and muscle, separating Thorn from his terrified stepson. Finn, pale and trembling, clung to Amelia's skirt, his gaze fixed on Axel as if he were a beacon in a storm. Thorn's eyes, black chips of ice, darted from Axel to the serpents, then back to Amelia, a calculating glint replacing the initial shock. He forced a strained smile, a grotesque parody of his earlier geniality. "This is hardly appropriate, gentlemen. A slight misunderstanding, nothing more. Finn is just a bit clumsy." He reached for Finn, his hand outstretched, but Axel intercepted it with a swift, almost imperceptible movement, his arm a barrier. Clumsy? Axel's voice held a dangerous edge. Or perhaps terrified? We saw the look in your eyes, Thorn, the one you usually save for behind closed doors. Amelia gasped, finally finding her voice. Victor? What is he talking about? Her gaze was searching, desperate, trying to reconcile the man she knew with the monstrous stranger standing before her. Thorn's forced smile vanished. This is an outrage. Who are these ruffians, Amelia? Get them out of my wedding. His voice rose, losing its earlier controlled cadence, revealing the raw anger beneath. They're here because Finn asked them to be, Amelia said, her voice barely a whisper, the words a confession and a revelation. She looked at Finn, then back at Thorn, a terrible understanding blooming in her eyes. You hurt him, didn't you? Thorn's face twisted. Don't be ridiculous, Amelia. I would never. Wouldn't you? Axel interjected, his voice like cold steel. We've seen the bruises on his spirit, Thorn. Bruises that don't always show on the skin. He nodded to Hammer, who stepped forward, a tablet in his hand. We've also seen the patterns, the quick temper, the isolating tactics, the charming front. It's a classic playbook, Thorn. And we've got evidence. Thorn's bravado finally cracked. His eyes widened, a flicker of genuine fear crossing his features. Evidence? What are you talking about? We've been watching, Hammer stated, his voice devoid of emotion. The nanny you fired for incompetence after she tried to report your behavior. The gardener who saw you shove Finn into a wall. The texts to Amelia, carefully crafted to manipulate and gaslight. It's all here. And we're prepared to present it to the authorities. A ripple of murmurs spread through the guests, who had been observing the unfolding drama, with a mix of shock and morbid fascination. The wedding planner, a woman of impeccable composure, looked as if she might faint. Thorn's carefully constructed world was collapsing around him. You won't get away with this, Thorn snarled, his voice hoarse with rage. He lunged, not at Axel, but at Finn, as if to prove a point, to reclaim his control. But before his hand could even brush Finn's arm, two serpents, quick as lightning, had him by the arms, pinning him. Let go of me, you animals! Thorn thrashed, his elegant suit now rumpled and absurd. Amelia pulled Finn closer, shielding him, her gaze fixed on Thorn with a profound sadness that eclipsed her initial horror. "It's over, Victor," she said, her voice firm, resolute. "This wedding is off, and I think it's time you left." Axel looked at Thorn, then at the stunned guests. "This man is a danger to children, a manipulator, and a fraud. We have ample proof, and we will ensure justice is served." He met Thorn's furious glare. "You chose to walk a forbidden path, Thorn. Now you'll face the consequences." The serpents escorted a struggling Thorn out of the ballroom, his indignant protests echoing down the marble hall. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by Amelia's quiet sobs as she knelt and hugged Finn, burying her face in his hair. The boy, finally safe, wrapped his small arms around his mother, tears streaming down his face. The serpents, their mission accomplished, stood guard, a silent testament to a promise kept, a darkness exposed, and a new beginning forged from the ashes of a shattered illusion. The wedding was over, but a different kind of union had just begun, one built on trust and protection, not deceit. A small voice, a big request. The opulent ballroom, moments ago a tableau of sophisticated revelry, now hummed with a different kind of energy. The lingering scent of lilies and expensive perfume mingled with the sharp tang of something metallic, perhaps the subtle hint of fear. Thorn, his face a mask of furious disbelief, was being led away by two grim-faced officers. Amelia, her bridal gown now a symbol of liberation rather than confinement, held Finn close, her body a protective shield. Axel, standing a few feet back, watched the scene unfold, a silent guardian. The serpents, a formidable semicircle around Finn and Amelia, ensured no one approached without permission. Finn, his small frame still trembling, buried his face in his mother's side. Amelia stroked his hair, her own relief, battling with a burgeoning anger. "It's over, sweet pea," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "He's gone." Axel stepped forward, his leather jacket creaking softly. "Amelia," he began, his voice gravelly but kind, "we need to talk. There are arrangements to be made." He glanced at Finn, then back at Amelia. "Are you both safe now? Do you need anything?" Amelia looked up, her eyes meeting his. A flicker of something unreadable passed between them. "We're safe, thanks to you, Axel. To all of you." Her gaze swept over the serpents, each face a study in stoic vigilance. "I don't know how to thank you." A burly serpent, his face adorned with a long gray beard, rumbled, "No thanks needed, ma'am. Just glad we could help the little guy." He nodded towards Finn, a surprising tenderness in his eyes. The police detective, a woman with keen, observant eyes, approached. "Ms. Vance, we'll need your statement, and Finn's when you're both ready. We have enough evidence to hold Mr. Thorne for questioning on multiple counts, but a full statement from both of you will solidify the case." Amelia nodded. "Of course. We'll cooperate fully." She looked down at Finn. "Are you up for it, sweet pea?" Finn pulled away from her. His eyes, though still wide, held a newfound determination. He looked directly at Axel. "Axel," he said, his voice small but clear, "can I talk to you? Alone?" Axel raised an eyebrow, a slight smile touching his lips. He knelt, bringing himself closer to the boy's level. "Sure, kid. What's on your mind?" The serpents, sensing the gravity of the moment, subtly shifted, creating a small bubble of privacy around Axel and Finn. Amelia watched, a knot of apprehension tightening in her stomach. What else could her son have endured in silence? Finn took a deep breath. My dad," he started, then corrected himself with a fierce shake of his head. Thorn. He had a lot of money. He bought my mom things. He acted nice to her in front of people, but he trailed off, his gaze darting to the floor. Axel waited patiently. But what, Finn? He was mean to me, Finn whispered, the words barely audible. He said if I told anyone, he'd hurt my mom. He said she wouldn't believe me anyway. He looked up at Axel, his eyes pleading. He said she was too stupid to see what he was really like. A cold fury simmered beneath Axel's calm exterior. He reached out, gently placing a hand on Finn's shoulder. Your mom is not stupid, Finn. She loves you very much. And she believes you now. Finn nodded, a tear escaping and tracing a path down his cheek. I know. I saw it. She hugged me. He sniffled, then continued, his voice gaining strength. I was scared, Axel. Really scared. That's why I asked you to come. I thought if you guys were there, he wouldn't try anything. Axel squeezed his shoulder. You were right, kid. You were very brave to reach out. But it's not just that, Finn said, his gaze fixed on Axel's face. Thorn, he had a big house, a really big one, and he said it was going to be mine someday. But he also said he was going to make sure my mom never got anything if she left him. Finn paused, then swallowed hard. He said he had ways, like he made sure no one would find out about the bad things he did with other people's money. Axel's expression hardened. Other people's money? Finn nodded emphatically. He had these papers. He kept them in a safe. He always looked at them when he thought I wasn't watching. And he'd talk on the phone, really quiet, about investments and offshore accounts and making sure the trails were cold. Axel exchanged a quick, meaningful glance with one of the serpents nearby. The implications were clear. Thorn wasn't just an abuser. He was likely involved in something far more illicit. Finn, Axel said, his voice low and serious. This is very important. Do you know where this safe is, or anything else about these papers? Finn nodded again. It's behind a painting in his study. The big one, with the ships, and he always wrote things down in a red notebook. He kept that in the safe, too. He looked up, his small voice echoing with a big request. Can you get them, Axel, before he does something to them? Axel looked at the small, courageous boy, then at Amelia, who was now watching them with a mixture of concern and growing understanding. He knew what he had to do. We'll see what we can do, Finn. You did a really good thing, telling us this. The truth spoken. The flashing blue and red lights painted the grand ballroom with an unsettling, kaleidoscopic glow, a stark contrast to the opulent decor. Victor Thorn, his face a mask of bewildered rage, was being led away in handcuffs. The collective gasp that had rippled through the wedding guests had subsided into a murmur of disbelief and frantic whispers. Amelia, her shoulders finally dropping from a perpetual state of tension, watched him go, a fragile peace settling over her features. She looked at Finn, who stood beside her, his small hand gripping hers tightly. The boy, though pale, held his chin high, his eyes reflecting a newfound resilience. Axel, standing a few feet away, felt a knot in his chest loosen. The immediate threat was neutralized, but the look in Finn's eyes, the quiet determination that had replaced the earlier terror, told him their work wasn't finished. Finn glanced up at Axel, then back at his mother. Mom, he began, his voice surprisingly steady. There's more. Victor. He has a lot of money. Bad money. Amelia knelt, her eyes searching Finn's face. What are you talking about, sweetie? He has offshore accounts, Finn continued, his words tumbling out with a practiced ease that suggested he'd replayed this conversation countless times in his head. And a safe. In his study, behind the big painting of the lighthouse. There are papers in there, important ones. He said they would ruin him if anyone found them. The ballroom, once a scene of festive chaos, now felt like a stage for a clandestine meeting. Guests were slowly being ushered out by a mix of uniformed officers and discreet security personnel, leaving the serpents, Amelia, and Finn in a small, hushed circle. Axel's gaze sharpened. This wasn't just about domestic abuse anymore. This was a deeper rot. Offshore accounts, Axel repeated, his voice low. And a safe with incriminating papers? He looked at Finn, a flicker of admiration in his eyes. How do you know all this, kiddo? Finn shrugged, a slight tremor running through him. I heard him on the phone sometimes. He wasn't very careful when he thought I was asleep, and he showed me the safe once, after he'd been drinking. Said I should never, ever touch it, or he'd send me away forever. The last words were a whisper, a ghost of the fear that had haunted him. Amelia pulled Finn into a tight hug, tears welling in her eyes. Oh, Finn, she murmured, her voice thick with emotion. You've been so brave. Why didn't you tell me? Finn leaned into her embrace. He made me promise, and he said he'd hurt you if I told anyone. He pulled back slightly, his eyes finding Axel's again. The papers, Axel? They're important. They could prove everything. Axel met Finn's gaze, a silent understanding passing between them. This wasn't just a boy asking for help. It was a testament to his courage and his innate sense of justice. He was offering a lifeline, not just for himself and his mother, but for a truth that Victor Thorne had meticulously buried. The serpents, initially drawn into a rescue mission, now found themselves at the precipice of something far larger. We need to get those documents, Axel stated, his voice devoid of any doubt. This could be the key to unlocking more than just Thorne's personal finances. It could expose a whole network. He turned to Snake, who had been listening intently. Get the guys ready. We're not done yet. Snake nodded, his expression grim. Consider it done, boss. We'll be ready to roll out as soon as the fuzz clears the scene. Amelia, still holding Finn close, looked at Axel, a dawning realization in her eyes. You mean you're going to investigate? Beyond this? Axel's eyes, usually a stormy gray, held a steady resolve. Finn didn't just expose a monster in his house, Amelia. He uncovered a trail, and the serpents follow trails, especially when they lead to bigger snakes. He glanced at Finn, a genuine smile softening his rugged features. You're a sharp kid, Finn. You just gave us a whole new direction. Finn, seeing the seriousness in Axel's eyes, felt a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. He had done it. He had spoken the truth, and it was being heard. He had brought down the monster, and now, with the serpents by his side, he was helping to dismantle the very foundations of the darkness his stepfather had built. The air crackled with a new kind of tension, not of immediate danger, but of anticipation, of a hunt about to begin. The serpents had saved them, and now they were guardians of a truth that could shake more than just Thorne's carefully constructed world. Grizzly's promise. The serpent's clubhouse, usually a cacophony of engines and raucous laughter, settled into an unusual quiet. Finn, still pale but resolute, sat on a worn leather couch, a glass of water clutched in his small hands. Amelia, her arm wrapped around his shoulders, watched Axel and Grizzly. The air crackled with a new kind of energy. Not the immediate threat of Victor, but the slow burn of a deeper conspiracy. "Offshore accounts," Grizzly rumbled, his voice a low growl that still managed to convey a surprising gentleness when directed at Finn. "And papers in a safe. That's more than just a rich bastard's nest egg, kiddo." His gaze met Axel's, a silent understanding passing between the two men. This wasn't about a personal grudge anymore. It was about exposing something far more insidious. Axel leaned against a wall, arms crossed. Victor Thorne isn't just a local politician. He's got connections, influence. If Finn's right about these accounts, there's a network, a big one. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "We need those papers, and we need to find out who else is tied into this." Finn, emboldened by the serpent's unwavering support, piped up. "The safe is in his study, behind the bookshelf. There's a painting of a boat, and if you push the top right corner." He trailed off, his eyes wide, remembering the clandestine moments he'd observed Victor. Amelia squeezed his shoulder, a mixture of fear and pride in her eyes. Finn used to sneak in there when Victor was busy. He'd hear him on the phone talking about asset management and untraceable funds. Grizzly pushed off the couch, his massive frame filling the small space. "We can't just waltz back into his house. Not with the cops crawling all over it. Thorne might be behind bars, but his people are still out there, ready to cover his tracks." His eyes narrowed, a glint of steel in their depths. "We need a plan. A quiet one." Axel nodded. "Exactly. We'll need to wait for the immediate heat to die down. The police will be looking for obvious evidence relating to the assault charges, not a meticulously hidden paper trail." He turned to Finn. "You're sure about the location? The code?" Finn nodded vigorously. "It's his birthday, June 15th. A spark ignited in Grizzly's eyes. "His birthday! A classic. Predictable for a man who thinks he's too clever to be caught." He clapped a hand on Axel's shoulder. "This goes beyond protecting Amelia and Finn, brother. This is about cleaning up a mess that's been festering for years." Axel met his gaze. "It is, and we're the ones to do it." He looked at Finn, a genuine smile softening his rugged features. "You've given us a lead, Finn. A big one. We won't let you down." The next few days were a whirlwind of hushed conversations and strategic planning. The Serpents, usually direct and confrontational, adapted to a more clandestine approach. They dispatched a few of their more tech-savvy members to discreetly monitor news reports and police activity around Thorne's mansion. They needed to know when the police presence dwindled, when the house became less of a crime scene and more of an abandoned fortress. Grizzly, meanwhile, took Finn under his wing in a different way. He taught him basic self-defense moves, not for fighting, but for understanding how to create space, how to evade. He also spent hours listening to Finn's observations about Victor, about the people who came and went from the mansion, the hushed phone calls, the patterns of his behavior. Finn's innocent recollections were a goldmine of information, painting a picture of a man meticulously building a web of deceit. One afternoon, Grizzly sat with Finn at a picnic table outside the clubhouse, carving a small wooden eagle with a surprisingly delicate hand. "You're a brave kid, Finn," he said, his voice gravelly. "Most adults wouldn't have the guts to do what you did." Finn looked up from the drawing he was making, a detailed sketch of Axel's bike. "I just wanted Mom to be safe." Grizzly nodded slowly. "And she is. Because of you." He paused, looking out at the open road. You know, my promise to you, the one I made at the wedding, to keep you and your mom safe, that promise still stands, and it just got a whole lot bigger. Finn frowned. Bigger how? Because, Grizzly explained, his eyes locking with Finn's. Sometimes, keeping people safe means tearing down the bad things that would hurt them. And Victor Thorne, he's just one brick in a very rotten wall. We're going to tear that wall down, Finn, piece by piece. And you're going to help us. A slow, determined smile spread across Finn's face. He understood. It wasn't just about Victor anymore. It was about justice, about making sure no one else suffered like he and his mother had. He picked up his crayon, adding more intricate details to Axel's bike, a silent pact solidifying between a little boy and a weathered biker. The serpents, once a shield, were now a hammer, and Finn, unknowingly, had become their compass. Wedding day blues. The scent of stale beer and exhaust fumes clung to the air in the Serpent's clubhouse, a familiar comfort that was, for once, punctuated by the crisp, almost clinical smell of disinfectant. Bones, the club's resident tech wizard, hunched over a battered laptop, a pair of wire-rimmed glasses perched precariously on his nose. Finn, perched on a stool beside him, pointed a small, steady finger at a grainy blueprint displayed on the screen. "That's it," Finn said, his voice a low, urgent whisper. "The study, and the wall safe. It's behind the painting of the ship." Axel, leaning against a graffiti-scarred pillar, crossed his arms. "You're sure about the combination?" Finn nodded, his gaze unwavering. "Victor always muttered it. Birthdays, his, then my mom's, then mine." A flicker of something cold, something beyond childhood resentment, passed through his eyes. "He thought I was too young to remember." The room was quiet, save for the rhythmic clicking of Bones's keyboard. Each serpent present, Axel, Bones, Rattler, and even the usually stoic Ghost, felt the weight of Finn's words. This wasn't just about recovering stolen money. It was about breaking a cycle of abuse, about dismantling a man's carefully constructed empire of lies. "Okay," Axel finally said, pushing off the pillar. "Here's the plan. Bones, you'll be our eyes and ears. Remote access to the security cameras, anything you can get. Rattler, Ghost, you're with me. We go in through the service entrance just like Finn described." He looked at Finn, a silent question passing between them. "You're sure you can draw him out?" Finn's small hand clenched into a fist. "He'll be at the charity gala. Always wants to be seen. Always has to give a speech. He won't miss it." A chill ran down Axel's spine. The boy's understanding of his stepfather was chillingly precise, a testament to the calculating nature of the man they were up against. This wasn't just a simple break-in. It was a high-stakes chess match, and Finn was their most valuable pawn. The next evening, the Serpent's usual rumble of engines was replaced by the hushed purr of a borrowed black sedan, its windows tinted to obsidian. The mansion, a sprawling testament to Thorne's ill-gotten gains, glowed with a faint, almost ethereal light from within, an ironic contrast to the darkness they aimed to expose. Bones, hunched over a laptop in the back of a parked van a block away, spoke into his comms. "Security feeds clear. Front door's a revolving door of society types. Looks like Thorne's on schedule for his big speech." Axel, Rattler, and Ghost, clad in dark, nondescript clothing, moved like shadows towards the service entrance. The air was thick with the scent of blooming jasmine and the distant strains of classical music, a stark juxtaposition to the task at hand. Ghost expertly picked the lock, the soft click echoing loudly in the quiet night. Inside, the mansion was a labyrinth of polished marble and hushed opulence. They navigated through service corridors, following the mental map Finn had drawn for them. Each step was deliberate, each breath held. The tension in the air was palpable, a live wire humming with unspoken risk. They reached the study door, heavy and imposing. Axel tried the handle. Locked. Rattler produced a slim set of picks, his calloused fingers working with surprising delicacy. The rhythmic clinking of metal on metal filled the silence, a counterpoint to Axel's pounding heart. Suddenly, Bones's voice crackled through their comms. "Hold on. Thermal sensors just tripped. Someone's in the West Wing. Could be a housekeeper, but stay alert." Axel's hand instinctively went to the pistol holstered at his back. They were on a knife edge. One wrong move, and everything could unravel. Rattler, his brow furrowed in concentration, continued to work the lock, his movements unhurried despite the rising pressure. A soft click, and the door swung open. The study was a cavernous space, dominated by a massive mahogany desk, and just as Finn had described, a large oil painting of a clipper ship. Axel moved towards it, his gaze sweeping the room for any unexpected surprises. "Clear," he murmured, signaling to Rattler and Ghost. As Axel carefully unhooked the painting, revealing the steel safe behind it, the distant sound of Thorne's booming voice, amplified by the Gala's sound system, drifted through the open windows. "And it is with this spirit of generosity and community that we strive to build a better tomorrow." The irony was not lost on them. This man, so adept at playing the philanthropist, was about to have his carefully constructed world shattered by the very people he deemed beneath him, and a boy he'd thought he'd broken. The combination Finn had provided clicked into place, the tumblers falling with a satisfying thud. The safe door swung open, revealing stacks of documents and a handful of worn leather-bound ledgers. This was it. The heart of the snake. The grand entrance. The serpents roared into the Thorne estate, a phalanx of chrome and leather slicing through the genteel evening. The meticulously manicured lawns, usually reserved for imported luxury sedans, now vibrated with the guttural rumble of their engines. Each bike, a custom beast of engineering, gleamed under the twilight, reflecting the stunned faces of arriving gala guests. Axel, at the head, throttled back, his gaze sweeping over the scene. The valet parking, typically a ballet of polite efficiency, dissolved into chaos as attendants scrambled, their faces a mixture of fear and bewildered curiosity. Finn, seated pillion behind Axel, felt a tremor of anticipation, a nervous energy that warred with a grim satisfaction. He tightened his grip on Axel's waist, the leather of the vest warm beneath his fingers. This was it, the culmination of weeks of planning, the moment Thorne's carefully constructed facade would begin to crack. The bikes pulled to a halt directly in front of the grand entrance, forming an imposing, semicircular barrier. Their arrival was less an entrance and more a declaration of war. Heads swiveled. Conversations died. The string quartet, mid-Strauss waltz, faltered, discordant squeak, piercing the sudden silence. Amelia, positioned near the entrance in a stunning emerald green gown, felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cool evening air. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat of anxiety and hope. She watched as Victor, his face a mask of practiced charm, moments before, stiffened. The forced smile on his lips wavered, replaced by a flicker of something venomous. He was talking to the mayor's wife, a woman, whose pearls seemed to constrict her neck with every shocked gasp. Axel dismounted first, his boots thudding against the flagstones, a sound that resonated with authority. He removed his helmet, shaking out his dark hair his eyes like flint, scanning the crowd, daring anyone to meet his gaze. Rattler and Ghost dismounted simultaneously, their movements economical, precise. Rattler's braided beard caught the last rays of the setting sun, a fiery halo around his scowling face. Ghost, ever the enigma, moved with a fluid grace that belied his powerful build, his eyes hidden behind dark lenses that reflected the scene like twin mirrors. "Evening, everyone." Axel's voice, a low rumble, carried across the suddenly silent space. It wasn't a greeting, it was a challenge. "Lovely party you're having." Victor Thorne, recovering from his initial shock, straightened his silk jacket, a forced smile returning to his face. He walked towards them, his movements stiff, his eyes darting between Axel and the assembled guests. "Axel, Finn, what a surprise. I wasn't aware you'd been invited." The words were laced with a thinly veiled threat, a desperate attempt to regain control. Finn slid off the bike, a figure of quiet defiance in his dark suit, a stark contrast to the biker leathers surrounding him. He met Victor's gaze, a lifetime of suppressed anger simmering beneath the surface. "Some invitations are extended in different ways, Victor," he said, his voice steady, belying the tremor in his hands. Amelia, seeing Finn's composure, felt a surge of pride. He was no longer the frightened boy, but a man stepping into his own power. She moved subtly, positioning herself closer to the entrance, ready to act as a diversion if needed. Victor's eyes narrowed, a cold glint appearing in their depths. "I see. Well, perhaps you can enlighten me as to the purpose of this disruption." His voice was louder now, aiming to project an air of authority. But the tremor in his hands was evident to anyone looking closely. Just then, two uniformed security guards, their faces grim, approached from inside the mansion. Thorne gestured subtly, a silent command. "I believe these gentlemen would like a word with you about trespassing." Axel chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "Trespassing? On property that's about to be returned to its rightful owners? I think not." He took a step forward, closing the distance between them. The tension in the air crackled, thick and palpable. Rattler and Ghost moved, too, their presence a silent, formidable backing. The gala guests, now a frozen tableau of horror and fascination, watched, transfixed. This was not the kind of entertainment usually found at a Thorne charity event. "What are you talking about, Axel?" Victor's voice was strained, the facade beginning to crack under the pressure. The color had drained from his face, leaving it a sickly pale. "We're talking about justice, Victor," Finn interjected, stepping forward, his voice clear and resonant. "About the money you stole, the lives you ruined, and the truth you've tried to bury." Victor's eyes, full of malice, locked onto Finn. "You little ingrate. You dare—" Before he could finish, Axel's hand shot out, not touching Victor, but stopping just inches from his face. A clear warning. "Easy, Thorne. The show's just beginning." He turned to the assembled guests, a slow, predatory smile spreading across his face. "Ladies and gentlemen, allow us to present the true face of Victor Thorne." The security guards hesitated, caught between their orders and the sheer, intimidating presence of the serpents. The string quartet, having recovered, began a tentative, mournful melody, an oddly fitting soundtrack to the unfolding drama. The grand entrance was no longer just an entrance. It was a stage, and the serpents had just taken center stage. The mask falls. The opulent ballroom, moments ago a symphony of polite murmurs and clinking champagne flutes, now resonated with the low thrum of idling engines and the collective gasp of Thorne's guests. Axel, a silhouette against the grand entrance, stepped forward, the gleam of his chrome-plated boot catching the light. "Victor Thorne," he stated, his voice a gravelly rumble that cut through the sudden silence. "Funny. I always pictured your downfall in a back alley, not a ballroom." Thorne, his face a mask of calculated fury, took a step back, his eyes darting between Axel's unyielding gaze and the formidable line of serpents fanning out behind him. "What is the meaning of this intrusion?" he blustered, attempting to regain control, his hand instinctively reaching for the security guard nearest him. The guard, however, looked less inclined to intervene, and more like he wanted to disappear into the gilded wallpaper. Finn, his small frame radiating a surprising resolve, slipped past Axel. He clutched a worn, leather-bound journal to his chest. "It means," Finn's voice, though young, carried an undeniable weight, "that your lies are over, Mr. Thorne." He took another step, placing himself directly in Thorne's line of sight. Amelia, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs, moved to Finn's side, a silent sentinel. She watched Thorne's face, not just for anger, but for the flicker of recognition, the moment the mask would truly fall. "Lies! What in God's name are you talking about, boy?" Thorne's voice rose, a thin veneer of outrage barely concealing a deeper tremor of fear. His gaze flickered to the journal, a microscopic hesitation in his practiced composure. It was a tell Amelia had been waiting for. "This," Finn declared, holding up the journal, "is a record of everything. The stolen funds from the orphanage, the manipulated land deals, the threats against anyone who got in your way. My father tried to expose you, and you ruined him." The ballroom buzzed with whispers, the polite society facade cracking under the weight of Finn's accusations. Axel stepped closer to Thorne, his shadow enveloping the smaller man. "You embezzled millions, Victor. Funds meant for children, for families. Then you bought your way out of trouble, silencing anyone who dared to speak up. But you couldn't silence everyone, could you?" His gaze swept over the stunned guests, many of whom were now openly staring, their champagne flutes forgotten. Thorne's carefully constructed composure finally shattered. His face, usually a picture of smooth political charm, twisted into a snarl. "This is preposterous. A desperate fabrication by a deluded child and his thugs." He gestured wildly at the serpents, his voice thick with contempt. "Security! Get these ruffians out of my sight!" The security detail, however, remained rooted to the spot, their eyes wide with uncertainty. Confronting a handful of rowdy guests was one thing. Facing down a dozen leather-clad bikers, radiating coiled menace was quite another. "They're not thugs, Victor," Amelia interjected, her voice clear and strong, cutting through Thorne's sputtering rage. "They're here for justice." She met his eyes, a fierce defiance burning in hers. "And I'm here to make sure you finally face the consequences." Thorne's gaze snapped to Amelia. A cruel smile touched his lips, a flicker of the man she knew behind closed doors. "Amelia, my dear, always so dramatic. Come, let's not embarrass ourselves further." He extended a hand, a paternal gesture that felt utterly predatory. Amelia recoiled, a shiver running down her spine. "Don't touch me." Her voice was colder than the polished marble floors. "You think you can manipulate everyone, don't you? You think your money and your power make you untouchable. But you underestimated Finn, and you underestimated the serpents." Axel, seeing the raw fear and hatred in Amelia's eyes, stepped between her and Thorne. "The party's over, Victor. Your reign of terror ends tonight." He nodded to Ratchet, who immediately pulled a tablet from his saddlebag. A few deft taps, and the giant screens adorning the ballroom walls, previously displaying elegant floral arrangements, flickered to life. The first image that appeared was a scanned page from Finn's journal, detailing a large sum of money diverted from the orphanage's endowment. A collective gasp rippled through the room. The carefully cultivated image of Victor Thorne, benevolent politician and pillar of the community, was crumbling into dust before their very eyes. Thorne lunged, not at Axel, but at Ratchet, his face contorted in a desperate attempt to stop the exposé. But Ratchet, nimble despite his bulk, easily sidestepped, and Thorne stumbled, his expensive suit wrinkling as he nearly fell. "More to come, folks," Ratchet announced, a mischievous grin spreading across his face as he scrolled to the next document. The image of a falsified land deed, bearing Thorne's unmistakable signature, filled the screens. Murmurs erupted, louder this time, tinged with outrage. Thorne, his face now a mottled red, spun to face the serpents. "You'll pay for this, every last one of you. My lawyers will bury you. I'll ensure you never see the light of day again." His threats, however, now lacked their former bite, sounding more like the desperate flailing of a cornered animal than the pronouncements of a powerful man. Axel met Thorne's enraged gaze, a slow, predatory smile spreading across his face. "Bring it on, Victor. We've been waiting for this fight." He knew this was just the beginning, but the first crack in Thorne's formidable facade had appeared. The mask had fallen, and the true monster underneath was finally exposed for all to see. The serpents, a silent, unwavering wall of leather and steel, stood ready for the storm that was sure to follow. A safe future. The collective gasp rippled through the ballroom, a wave of shocked realization washing over Thorne's unsuspecting guests. The carefully curated world Thorne had built, brick by polished brick of lies and manipulation, fractured before their eyes. The projection of the land deeds, crisp and damning, hung over the dance floor, a silent testament to his greed. "That's the orphanage," a woman shrieked, her voice cutting through the stunned silence. "My nephew was there. Where did the funds go?" The murmurs grew, coalescing into a furious roar. Thorne, his face a mask of purple disbelief, lunged towards the screen, as if he could physically tear down the evidence. But Ratchet, ever vigilant, merely adjusted the projector, the image holding firm, unwavering. "You took everything," Amelia whispered, her voice trembling with a potent mix of grief and fury. Her gaze, usually soft and ethereal, was now honed to a sharp, incandescent point, impaling Thorne. "You promised us a future, a safe place. You promised me a future." Thorne stumbled back, his eyes darting frantically around the room, searching for an escape, a friendly face, a shred of the authority he so desperately clung to. But the guests, his supposed allies, now looked at him with a chilling blend of disgust and betrayal. Their opulent finery seemed to wilt under the weight of his exposed corruption. Axel stepped forward, his presence radiating an unshakable resolve. "The truth, Victor, has a way of finding its light, no matter how deeply you bury it." His words were calm, precise, a stark contrast to the chaos erupting around them. Finn, clutching the journal, stepped beside Axel, his small frame radiating a surprising strength. He looked at Thorne, not with fear, but with a quiet, unwavering conviction. "You hurt a lot of people, Mr. Thorne, but you won't hurt anyone else." A security guard, one of Thorne's personal enforcers, finally broke through the crowd, charging towards Axel. But before he could reach him, a blur of motion from the periphery. Snake, moving with the deceptive speed of his namesake, intercepted the guard with a swift economic move, his arm locking around the man's throat, a silent warning. The guard's eyes bulged, and he quickly subsided, recognizing the futility of resistance. The arrival of the authorities, sirens wailing faintly in the distance, further amplified the palpable tension. The serpents, however, were not the ones apprehended. Instead, Thorn, flailing and protesting, was swiftly taken into custody. As the handcuffs clicked into place, the last vestiges of his power crumbled, leaving behind only the pathetic image of a disgraced man. Amelia watched, a silent tear tracing a path down her cheek. It wasn't a tear of sorrow, but of release, of the long-awaited cessation of a suffocating nightmare. Axel, sensing her silent catharsis, gently placed a hand on her shoulder. She leaned into his touch, finding a quiet comfort in his presence. Later, as the serpents gathered in the relative quiet of their clubhouse, the high-octane adrenaline of the heist began to ebb, replaced by a sense of profound accomplishment. Finn sat at the table, the infamous journal now carefully laid out before him, its pages filled with Thorn's meticulous records of deceit. "This," Finn began, his voice still a little hoarse from the evening's revelations, "is just the beginning. Thorn wasn't working alone. There are names here, organizations, a network." He pointed to an entry, a cryptic reference to the Syndicate. Axel leaned in, his brows furrowed. "The Syndicate? That's a big claim, Finn. What makes you so sure?" "Thorn's notes, the coded messages, the recurring patterns in the embezzlement schemes. They all point to something larger, something far more organized than just one corrupt politician," Finn explained, his finger tracing a complex web of connections in the journal. He was a cog in a much bigger machine. A hush fell over the room as the implications of Finn's words settled. The serpents had rescued Finn and Amelia, exposed Thorn, and brought him to justice. They had fulfilled their promise. But now, a new path was unfurling, a more formidable challenge. "So, what do we do?" Ratchet asked, breaking the silence, his usual sardonic humor replaced by a rare seriousness. Finn looked up, his gaze sweeping across the faces of the serpents. "We expose them. All of them. Thorn's arrest will send ripples, but the source of the corruption is still out there. We use this information, this journal, to dismantle the entire network." Axel met Finn's gaze, a flicker of pride in his eyes. He saw not just a boy, but a strategist, a leader in the making. The club's initial mission, born of a personal vendetta, was evolving. It was no longer about personal retribution. It was about a broader fight for justice. "It won't be easy," Axel warned, but his voice carried a note of quiet determination. "This syndicate will be far more dangerous than Thorn." "I know," Finn said, a resolute glint in his eyes. "But we have the truth. And now, we have each other." He looked around at the serpents, a silent acknowledgement of their shared commitment. The serpents exchanged glances, a silent understanding passing between them. They had started as a group of outcasts, united by loyalty and a code of their own. Now, under Finn's unexpected guidance, they were poised to become something more, a force for justice, a bulwark against the shadows. The future, though uncertain, was clearer than it had ever been. A safe future, for more than just Finn and Amelia, was now within their reach, and they would fight for it.